Kwame Osei walked through the busy terminal at John F. Kennedy International Airport, with his backpack slung over one shoulder. He wore a simple gray hoodie and comfortable jeans. His sneakers were clean but worn from use. To anyone looking at him, he seemed like any other tired traveler heading home after a long trip. But Kwame was not just any traveler. He was one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the world. At 47 years old, he had built a technology and telecommunications empire that stretched across 3 continents. His companies provided internet access to millions of people in rural Africa. His apps were used by hundreds of millions worldwide. His name appeared regularly in business magazines and news programs. Today, however, he just wanted to get home to London. He had spent the past week in New York attending back-to-back meetings. He was exhausted. His phone buzzed constantly with messages and emails, but he ignored them. For the next 7 hours on the flight, he planned to sleep and maybe catch up on some reading. Kwame approached Gate 47 where his flight was boarding. The screen showed his flight to London departing in 30 minutes. He joined the line for first-class passengers. There were only 3 people ahead of him. He pulled out his phone and checked his messages one last time before boarding. The gate agent scanned his boarding pass with a friendly smile. "Have a wonderful flight, Mr. Osei," she said warmly. "Thank you," Kwame replied, returning her smile. He walked down the jet bridge and entered the aircraft. The first-class cabin was at the front, spacious and quiet. The seats were large and covered in soft leather. Only a few passengers had boarded so far. An elderly white man in an expensive suit sat in seat 2A, already reading a newspaper. A young Asian woman was settling into seat 2B, pulling out her laptop. Kwame found his seat, 1A, right at the front by the window. He lifted his backpack to put it in the overhead bin. "Excuse me." A sharp voice cut through the quiet cabin. "Sir, excuse me?" Kwame turned around. A flight attendant stood in the aisle behind him. She was a white woman in her mid-30s with blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her name tag read Rachel Morrison. Her face showed clear irritation. "Yes?" Kwame said politely. "Economy class is at the back of the plane," Rachel said, pointing toward the rear of the aircraft. Her tone was condescending, like she was speaking to a child who had wandered into the wrong room. Kwame blinked in surprise. "I'm sorry?" "This is first class," Rachel continued, her voice growing louder. "You need to go back there." She pointed again toward economy. "I have a first-class ticket," Kwame said calmly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his boarding pass. He held it out to her. Rachel barely looked at it. She glanced at the boarding pass for less than a second. "There must be some mistake," she said firmly. "This can't be right. Let me see your ID." Kwame felt a familiar tightness in his chest. He had experienced moments like this before, but they never got easier. He pulled out his passport and handed it to her along with his boarding pass. Rachel looked at the documents, but her expression did not change. She seemed convinced that something was wrong. "Wait here," she said shortly. She turned and walked toward the front of the plane, disappearing into the galley area. The elderly businessman in 2A lowered his newspaper. He looked at Kwame with suspicion. "Is there a problem?" he asked Rachel when she returned. "I'm handling it, sir," Rachel replied. She had brought another flight attendant with her, an older woman with gray hair. The name tag read Susan Chen, lead flight attendant. "What seems to be the issue?" Susan asked quietly. "This passenger is in first class, but I think there's been a ticketing error," Rachel said, speaking as if Kwame was not standing right there. "His boarding pass says 1A, but—" She trailed off, but her meaning was clear. Susan took the boarding pass and looked at it carefully. She pulled out a tablet and checked the passenger manifest. Her face grew concerned as she scrolled through the information. "Rachel, this is correct," Susan said quietly. "Mr. Osei is assigned to 1A. But that doesn't make sense," Rachel said, her voice rising. "How did he— I mean, there must be—" "The boarding pass is legitimate," Susan said firmly. She turned to Kwame with an apologetic smile. "I'm very sorry for the confusion, Mr. Osei. Please make yourself comfortable." Rachel's face turned red. She did not apologize. Instead, she turned away quickly and busied herself with checking the overhead bins. The elderly businessman was not satisfied. "You should double-check that," he said loudly to Susan. "I paid good money for this seat. I don't want any problems." "Sir, everything is in order," Susan said firmly. "Please return to your seat." Kwame finally sat down in 1A. He could feel the eyes of other passengers on him. His hands shook slightly as he buckled his seatbelt. He stared out the window, trying to calm the anger and hurt rising in his chest. The young woman in 2B glanced at him sympathetically. She looked like she wanted to say something, but she remained silent. More passengers began boarding. Combe heard them passing behind his seat, their carry-on bags bumping along the aisle. He kept his eyes fixed on the window, watching the ground crew load luggage into the cargo hold below. Rachel returned to take drink orders from first-class passengers before takeoff. She moved down the aisle with a tray of champagne and orange juice. "Champagne or orange juice?" she asked the elderly businessman warmly. "Champagne, please," he said. "And for you, ma'am?" Rachel asked the young woman in 2B, her voice friendly. "Orange juice, thank you," the woman replied. Rachel turned to Kwame. Her smile disappeared. "Drink?" she asked curtly. "Orange juice, please," Kwame said politely. Rachel handed him a plastic cup with barely an ounce of juice in it. The other passengers had received full glasses in proper glassware. Kwame noticed but said nothing. He simply took the cup and thanked her. By now the captain had entered the cockpit. He poked his head out briefly, surveying the cabin. His eyes passed over Kwame without recognition. The door closed again. As the final passengers boarded, Kwame pulled out his laptop. He had work to do, documents to review. He tried to focus on the screen, but his mind kept returning to what had just happened. He thought about his son, Daniel, who was 16. Soon Daniel would be traveling alone for school trips and college visits. Would flight attendants treat him the same way? The thought made Kwame's chest tighten even more. He had built a billion-dollar empire. He employed thousands of people. He had donated hundreds of millions to charity. He had been invited to speak at the United Nations and had met with world leaders. Yet none of that mattered to Rachel Morrison. She had looked at his skin color and his casual clothes and decided he did not belong in first class. The plane pushed back from the gate. The engines roared to life. Kwame closed his eyes and took a deep breath. 7 more hours, he thought. Just 7 more hours and he would be home. But the flight was just beginning. And neither Kwame nor Rachel knew how much would change before it was over. The plane climbed steadily into the evening sky. The lights of New York City spread below them like a glittering blanket. Kwame watched through his window as the city grew smaller and smaller. Soon they were above the clouds, and there was nothing to see but darkness and the blinking wing lights. The seatbelt sign turned off with a soft chime. Passengers began moving around the cabin. Some headed to the bathroom. Others retrieved items from overhead bins. In first class, Rachel and Susan began preparing the meal service. Rachel pushed a cart down the aisle. She stopped at each row, taking orders with a practiced smile. When she reached the elderly businessman in 2A, her smile grew warmer. "Good evening, sir. For dinner tonight, we have your choice of herb-crusted salmon or beef tenderloin with roasted vegetables," Rachel said pleasantly. "I'll have the beef, medium rare," the businessman said without looking up from his newspaper. "Excellent choice. And to drink?" "Red wine. Your best bottle." "Of course, sir." Rachel made a note on her pad. She turned to the young woman in 2B. "And for you, ma'am?" "The salmon, please." "And just water," the woman said with a smile. She had been watching the interaction carefully. Her name was Minji Park, and she was a journalist for a major online publication. She traveled frequently for work and had seen many things on airplanes, but what she had witnessed during boarding troubled her deeply. Rachel moved to Kwame's seat. The warm smile vanished from her face. "Dinner choice?" she asked flatly. "The salmon sounds wonderful," Kwame said politely. "And a glass of white wine, please." Rachel wrote it down without comment and moved on. 30 minutes later, she returned with the meals. The businessman received his beef on fine china, perfectly plated with garnish. The vegetables were arranged artfully. His wine came in a proper glass, filled generously. Minji received her salmon beautifully presented, with a lemon wedge and fresh herbs. Her water came in a real glass with ice. Rachel set Kwame's tray down with a thud. The salmon looked dried out like it had been sitting under a heat lamp too long. The vegetables were sparse. His white wine came in a plastic cup, barely filled to the halfway mark. Kwame looked at his meal, then at the meals of his neighbors. The difference was obvious. He took a breath and cut into his salmon. It was overcooked and tough. He ate it anyway, not wanting to cause another scene. Minji noticed everything. She pulled out her phone and discreetly took notes. As a journalist, she had covered many stories about discrimination, but witnessing it firsthand made her angry in a way that surprised her. After the meal service, Rachel collected the trays. She asked the businessman if he needed anything else. She chatted briefly with another passenger across the aisle, but when she took Kwame's tray, she did not make eye contact or speak. Kwame tried to focus on his work. He opened his laptop and joined a video conference with his team in Nairobi. They were discussing a new initiative to build schools in rural Kenya. Kwame's foundation had committed $50 million to the project. The construction on the first 3 schools begins next month, his project manager said through the screen. We have the permits approved and the contractors ready. That's excellent news, Kwame said, his face brightening for the first time since boarding. Make sure we hire locally as much as possible. This project should create jobs, not just schools. Absolutely. Mr. Osei, we've already partnered with local businesses for materials and labor. Rachel passed by his seat carrying a tray of drinks for other passengers. She overheard part of the conversation. The words $50 million and Mr. Osei registered in her mind. She paused for a moment, then continued down the aisle. A small seed of doubt began to plant itself in her thoughts. 2 hours into the flight, a commotion broke out in economy class. A woman started coughing violently. Her husband called out for help, panic in his voice. She can't breathe. Someone help. She's allergic to peanuts. Susan rushed toward the back of the plane. Rachel followed close behind. The woman's face was swelling. Her breathing came in short, desperate gasps. Her husband held her hand, tears streaming down his face. Does anyone have an EpiPen? Susan called out loudly. We need an EpiPen right now. Kwame heard the commotion. He unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small medical kit. Inside was an EpiPen. His daughter Amma had severe allergies. Kwame never traveled without one. He moved quickly down the aisle. Other passengers pressed themselves against their seats to let him pass. When he reached the woman, she was turning blue. I have an EpiPen, Kwame said calmly. I know how to use it. May I help? The husband nodded frantically. Please, yes, please. Kwame knelt beside the woman. His hands were steady and sure. He had practiced this many times with Amma's doctor. He removed the EpiPen from its case, pulled off the safety cap, and pressed it firmly against the woman's thigh. The medication released with a soft click. There, Kwame said gently. The medicine is in. Just breathe slowly. You're going to be okay. The woman's breathing began to ease almost immediately. The swelling started to reduce. Color returned to her face. She gasped and coughed, but air was flowing to her lungs again. Thank you, she whispered hoarsely. Thank you so much. Rest now, Kwame said. He looked at Susan. She should be monitored closely. Sometimes a second reaction can occur. Do you have medical equipment on board? Yes, we have an oxygen tank and a medical kit. I'll get them right away, Susan said. She looked at Kwame with new respect in her eyes. Rachel stood frozen watching the scene. She saw the expensive watch on Kwame's wrist for the first time. She noticed the confident way he had handled the emergency, the medical knowledge he possessed, the kindness in his voice as he spoke to the frightened woman. Kwame stayed with the woman for 20 minutes, making sure she remained stable. He talked to her husband, explaining what to watch for and when to seek additional medical help after landing. He gave them his EpiPen, saying he had another at home. You saved my wife's life, the husband said, shaking Kwame's hand firmly. I don't know how to thank you. I'm just glad I could help, Kwame said with a warm smile. My daughter has allergies too. I understand how scary this can be. When Kwame returned to his seat, the other first-class passengers looked at him differently. Several nodded at him with respect. One man said quietly, Well done. Minji leaned across the aisle. That was incredible, she said. You were so calm. Practice, Kwame said with a slight smile. My daughter keeps me prepared. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Rodriguez speaking. I want to thank the passenger who provided emergency medical assistance. Mr. Kwame Osei, on behalf of the entire crew and all our passengers, thank you for your quick thinking and kindness. The passenger is stable and doing well thanks to you. The cabin erupted in applause. Passengers clapped and some stood up to see who the captain was talking about. Kwame waved his hand slightly, uncomfortable with the attention. He just wanted to return to his work. Rachel felt her stomach drop. Kwame Osi. She knew that name. She had heard it before, but where? She pulled out her phone as she walked toward the galley. She typed his name into the search engine. Her screen filled with results. Photos of Kwame in business suits at conferences, articles about his technology companies, news stories about his charitable work. One headline read, "Billionaire Kwame Osi pledges $200 million to education in Africa." Another said, "Tech pioneer Osi, named one of the world's most influential people." Rachel's hands began to shake. She scrolled through article after article. She saw photos of Kwame meeting with presidents and prime ministers. She read about his companies that employed over 50,000 people worldwide. She learned about his rise from poverty in Ghana to becoming one of the youngest self-made billionaires in history, and she had treated him like a criminal trying to sneak into first class. Susan appeared beside her. "Are you all right, Rachel? You look pale." Rachel showed her the phone screen without speaking. Susan looked at the articles and closed her eyes. "Oh no," she whispered. "Oh, Rachel, do you realize what you did?" "I thought," Rachel started, but she could not finish. There was no excuse. She had looked at a black man in casual clothes and assumed he did not belong. She had been rude and dismissive. She had judged him based on nothing but his appearance. "We need to tell the captain," Susan said quietly. "Please don't," Rachel begged. "I'll apologize. I'll make it right." Rachel, 3 passengers already filed complaints during boarding. They sent messages through the in-flight Wi-Fi. The captain already knows Rachel felt sick. Her career was over. She knew it. But worse than that, she felt the crushing weight of shame. She had hurt someone who did not deserve it. She had been cruel to a man who had just saved a woman's life. The rest of the flight passed in a blur. Rachel moved through her duties mechanically. She avoided looking at Kwame. Every time she passed his seat, guilt washed over her. Kwame worked on his laptop, unaware of Rachel's crisis. He finished his video conference and reviewed some documents. He tried to nap but could not sleep. His mind kept returning to the incident at boarding. He wondered how many other people face similar treatment every day. He thought about all the black travelers who were questioned, stopped, and made to feel like they did not belong in spaces they had paid for. The plane touched down at London Heathrow Airport just after dawn. Rain streaked across the windows. The gray English sky matched Kwame's mood. He had not slept during the flight. His body ached from sitting too long and his mind felt heavy with exhaustion and frustration. The seatbelt sign turned off. Passengers began gathering their belongings. The usual sounds of a plane after landing filled the cabin. Overhead bins clicked open. People stretched and yawned. Everyone was eager to get off and start their day. Kwame pulled his backpack from under the seat in front of him. He had no other luggage. He traveled light whenever possible. Less to carry meant less hassle at baggage claim. As he stood up, the young woman from 2B approached him. She had kind eyes and a gentle smile. Minji extended her hand. "Mr. Osi, I'm Minji Park. I'm a journalist with Global News Online," she said. "I just wanted to say thank you for what you did during the flight. That woman would have died without your help." Kwame shook her hand. "Anyone with an EpiPen would have done the same thing." "Maybe, but not everyone would have stayed so calm," Minji said. She hesitated, then continued. "I also wanted to say that I saw what happened when you boarded. I saw how you were treated. I'm sorry you had to experience that." Kwame's expression grew weary. "It happens more often than you might think." "I know," Minji said quietly. "I write about these issues, stories about discrimination in everyday life. Would you be willing to talk to me about it? Your experience could help others understand what people face." Kwame considered her request. He was a private person despite his public profile. He did not like drawing attention to himself, but he also knew that staying silent would not change anything. "I appreciate the offer, but I don't think so," Kwame said gently. "I just want to go home and see my family." "I understand completely," Minji said. She pulled out a business card. "But if you change your mind, please reach out. These stories matter." Kwame took the card and slipped it into his pocket. "Thank you." The line began moving as passengers filed toward the exit. Kwame followed the crowd down the aisle. As he passed the galley area, he saw Rachel standing there. She looked like she had been crying. Her eyes were red and puffy. When she saw him, her face crumpled. "Mr. Osi, please," Rachel started. "I need to," but Kwame simply nodded politely and kept walking. He did not have the energy to hear another inadequate apology. He did not want to make her feel better about what she had done. He just wanted to leave. Rachel watched him go, tears streaming down her face. Susan put a hand on her shoulder. "Let him go, Rachel. You can't fix this right now." Minji was the last passenger to deplane from first class. As she passed Rachel, she stopped and looked at the flight attendant directly. "You should feel terrible," Minji said, her voice sharp but not unkind. "That man is one of the kindest people I've ever interviewed. He builds schools for children who have nothing. He provides internet to villages that have been forgotten by the world. And you treated him like a criminal because of the color of his skin." Rachel could not speak. She just nodded, fresh tears falling. Minji walked away, her mind already forming the article she would write. Kwame made his way through the airport quickly. Immigration took only a few minutes. He had no bags to collect. Within 30 minutes of landing, he was in a taxi heading home to his family. His phone buzzed constantly with messages. His assistant had sent a dozen emails overnight. His team in California wanted a conference call. Investors needed updates on quarterly reports. But Kwame ignored them all. He just stared out the taxi window, watching London wake up. He thought about his children. Daniel was 16 now, tall and handsome and brilliant. His daughter Amma was 13, fierce and funny and allergic to half the world. His youngest Kofi was only 8, still innocent and full of joy. What kind of world was he leaving for them? Would they face the same prejudice he did? Would their accomplishments be dismissed because of their skin? The taxi pulled up to his home in Kensington. It was a beautiful house, elegant but not flashy. Kwame paid the driver and walked to his front door. Before he could use his key, the door flew open. "Daddy!" Amma and Kofi shouted together, launching themselves at him. Kwame caught them both in a hug, lifting them off the ground despite his exhaustion. "Hello, my loves. I missed you so much." His wife, Abina, stood in the doorway with a warm smile. She was beautiful and brilliant, a doctor who ran a health clinic in East London. They had been married for 20 years. "Welcome home," she said, kissing him. Then she saw his face and her smile faded. "What happened?" "Later," Kwame said quietly. "Let me just be home for a bit." Abina understood. She ushered the children inside, telling them to give their father space to change and rest. Daniel appeared at the top of the stairs, giving his father a wave. Kwame waved back, grateful to be surrounded by the people who loved him. Meanwhile, at Heathrow Airport, Rachel sat in a small office with Susan and the airport manager. The manager was a stern-looking man named Peter Davies. He had printouts of the passenger complaints spread across his desk. 3 separate passengers filed formal complaints, Peter said, his voice cold and professional. One of them even recorded video on their phone during boarding. "The footage shows you refusing to allow Mr. Osei to take his seat. It shows you calling the lead attendant and making a scene. It shows another passenger supporting your actions with prejudiced assumptions." Rachel sat with her hands folded in her lap. She felt numb. "The airline takes these matters very seriously," Peter continued. "Discrimination of any kind is absolutely unacceptable. We have zero tolerance for this behavior." "I know," Rachel whispered. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking." "That's exactly the problem, Miss Morrison. You weren't thinking. You made an assumption based on appearance. Do you understand how serious this is?" Rachel nodded, unable to speak. "Mr. Osei has not filed a complaint himself," Peter said. "However, that doesn't change what happened. We have witnesses. We have video. And to make matters worse, do you have any idea who Kwame Osei is?" "I do now," Rachel said miserably. Peter pulled up a news article on his computer and turned the screen toward her. The headline read, "Billionaire investor Kwame Osei purchases major stake in transatlantic airlines." Rachel's blood ran cold. "What?" "He's now one of the largest shareholders in our parent company," Peter said. "He purchased the shares 3 months ago. He's been very vocal about improving customer service standards across the industry. He's written op-eds about discrimination in air travel, and you just became Exhibit A of everything he's been criticizing." Rachel put her head in her hands. This could not be happening. This was not just about losing her job anymore. This was about becoming the face of corporate discrimination. This was about humiliating herself and her airline on a global stage. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "You're suspended immediately, pending a full investigation," Peter said. "Human Resources will contact you within 48 hours. You'll need to attend a formal hearing. After that, The airline will decide on further action, which will likely include termination. Rachel nodded. She had expected this. I understand. I've worked in this industry for 30 years, Peter said, his tone softening slightly. I've seen a lot of flight attendants make mistakes. But this wasn't just a mistake. This was prejudice, and I'm honestly disappointed. I thought better of our staff. I thought better of myself, too, Rachel said, her voice breaking. She gathered her things and left the office. The airport was crowded now with morning travelers. She walked through the terminal in a daze, barely seeing the people around her. She reached the employee parking lot and sat in her car for a long time, just staring at nothing. Her phone rang. It was her husband, Mark. Hey, babe. How was the flight? He asked cheerfully. Rachel burst into tears. Between sobs, she told him everything. Mark listened in shocked silence. Oh, Rachel, he said when she finished. Oh no, I ruined everything, Rachel cried. My career is over. And I deserve it, Mark. I was so horrible to him. I didn't even think. I just assumed. I know, honey. I know. Come home. We'll figure this out together. But as Rachel drove home through the rainy London streets, she knew there was nothing to figure out. She had revealed something ugly about herself. Something she had not even realized was there. She thought she was a good person. She thought she treated everyone equally. But when tested, when faced with a black man in casual clothes in a space she thought he did not belong, her true biases had emerged. At his house, Kwame sat with Abena in their living room. The children were at school now. The house was quiet. He told her everything that had happened on the flight. I'm so sorry, Abena said, taking his hand. Are you okay? I'm tired, Kwame said honestly. I'm tired of having to prove I belong. I'm tired of being questioned and suspected. I'm tired of the looks and the assumptions. And I'm worried about our kids, especially Daniel. He's going to face this too. I know, Abena said softly. She had faced her own share of discrimination as a black doctor. Patients sometimes assumed she was a nurse. Other doctors sometimes questioned her credentials. She understood her husband's pain intimately. Kwame's phone buzzed with a notification. He glanced at it and frowned. It's an article from Global News Online, he said. He opened the link and began reading. The article was titled, Flying While Black. One passenger's experience with discrimination at 30,000 feet. It was written by Minji Park. Minji had not used Kwame's name. She had not identified the airline, but she had described the incident in careful detail. She wrote about the assumptions made, the poor treatment during the flight, and the contrast between the passenger's humble appearance and his actual identity. She wrote about how he had saved another passenger's life with grace and competence, and how that still had not been enough to earn basic respect. The article ended with a powerful statement. This is not about one flight attendant or one airline. This is about the everyday indignities that black travelers face across the industry. It's about assumptions made in split seconds that reveal deep-rooted biases. It's about a society that still judges people by the color of their skin before considering the content of their character. This is good, Abena said, reading over his shoulder. She told your story with respect. She did, Kwame agreed. But I'm not sure I want this attention. It was too late for that. The article was already going viral. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times on social media. People began commenting with their own stories of discrimination while traveling. The hashtag Flying While Black began trending. News outlets picked up the story, even though they did not know who the passenger was. And in her small apartment in South London, Rachel read the article on her phone. She recognized the story immediately. She saw herself described as the flight attendant whose prejudice blinded her to reality. She saw her actions laid bare for the world to judge. She closed her laptop and lay down on her couch, staring at the ceiling. Her life was falling apart and she had no one to blame but herself. The article spread like wildfire across the internet. Within 24 hours, it had been shared over 50,000 times. Major news networks picked up the story. Television programs discussed it. Radio hosts debated it. Everyone had an opinion. The hashtag Flying While Black exploded on social media. Thousands of people shared their own experiences of discrimination while traveling. Black businessmen told stories of being stopped and questioned in airport lounges they had paid to access. Black women described being asked repeatedly if they were sure they had first-class tickets. Black families talked about the extra scrutiny they received at security checkpoints. The stories poured in from around the world. They were heartbreaking and infuriating. Many people expressed anger. Others expressed sadness. But everyone agreed that something needed to change. Transatlantic Airlines found itself at the center of a public relations nightmare. Even though Minji's article had not named the airline, internet sleuths had figured it out within hours. Someone had posted the flight number. Another person had shared a photo from the airport. Soon everyone knew which airline had employed the discriminatory flight attendant. The airline's social media accounts were flooded with angry comments. People demanded accountability. They wanted to know what the airline would do about the incident. Some called for boycotts. Others demanded that the flight attendant be fired immediately. Rachel sat in her apartment watching her life implode in real time. Her name had not been released publicly yet, but she knew it was only a matter of time. Some of her co-workers already knew. Word was spreading through the airline staff. She received text messages from concerned friends. She ignored most of them. Her husband Mark tried to comfort her, but she pushed him away. She did not want comfort. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to go back in time and undo what she had done, but that was impossible. On the third day after the flight, Rachel received a call from Peter Davies at the airline. "Ms. Morrison, we need you to come in for a formal hearing tomorrow morning at 9, he said. His voice was businesslike and cold. "You'll meet with representatives from human resources, legal, and airline management. I strongly suggest you bring a union representative." "Will I be fired?" Rachel asked, her voice barely a whisper. "That will be determined at the hearing," Peter said. "But I'll be honest with you, Rachel. The situation is very serious. The airline is under immense public pressure. We need to demonstrate that we take these matters seriously." After the call ended, Rachel contacted her union representative, a woman named Patricia Green. Patricia had been with the flight attendants union for 15 years. She had seen many disciplinary hearings, but she sounded troubled when Rachel explained the situation. "I'll represent you at the hearing," Patricia said, "but I have to be honest. This is going to be very difficult. The airline is dealing with massive public backlash. They're going to want to make an example of this situation." "I know," Rachel said. "I deserve whatever happens." "Maybe so," Patricia said gently. "But let's focus on the hearing first. We'll prepare your statement tonight." Meanwhile, Kwame was dealing with his own fallout. His phone had not stopped ringing since the article went viral. Reporters wanted interviews. Talk show hosts wanted him to appear on their programs. Business associates wanted to discuss his investment in Transatlantic Airlines. Kwame refused most of the requests. He was not interested in becoming the public face of airline discrimination. He had not even confirmed publicly that he was the passenger in Minji's article, though many people had guessed. But he could not ignore the call from Richard Chen, the CEO of Transatlantic Airlines. Richard was a 60-year-old Chinese-American executive who had worked in the airline industry for 40 years. He was known for being tough but fair. "Mr. Osei, I need to speak with you about a serious matter," Richard said when Kwame finally answered. "I believe you were a passenger on our flight from New York to London 4 days ago." "I was," Kwame confirmed. "I want to apologize personally for what happened to you," Richard said. "The treatment you received was completely unacceptable. It goes against everything our airline stands for. We have launched a full investigation, and we are taking appropriate action." "What kind of action?" Kwame asked. "The flight attendant in question has been suspended. We are conducting a formal hearing tomorrow to determine the next steps. Given the severity of the situation, termination is likely." Kwame was quiet for a moment. He felt conflicted. Part of him wanted the flight attendant to face consequences. She had humiliated him. She had judged him based on his appearance. She had treated him with contempt. But another part of him wondered if simply firing one person would solve anything. Would it prevent the next incident? Would it change the culture that allowed such treatment to occur? "Mr. Chen, I appreciate your apology," Kwame said carefully. "But I'm not sure firing one employee addresses the real problem." "What do you mean?" Richard asked, sounding surprised. "The problem is systemic. It's not just about one flight attendant having a bad day. It's about unconscious bias that exists throughout your company and throughout the entire industry. Firing this woman might make you feel like you've done something, but it won't change the underlying issues." "You're right," Richard admitted. "So what do you suggest?" "I'd like to meet with you," Kwame said. Let's talk about real solutions. Training programs, accountability measures, cultural changes that go beyond just punishing people after the fact. Richard was silent for a moment. Then he said, "I would welcome that conversation. When can we meet?" "After your hearing tomorrow," Kwame said. "Handle your immediate situation first. Then let's talk about the future." The next morning, Rachel arrived at the airline's headquarters building at 8:30. Patricia met her in the lobby. They went through security and took the elevator to the executive floor. "Remember what we discussed," Patricia said quietly. "Be honest. Take responsibility. Show that you understand the gravity of what happened, and express genuine remorse." "That won't be difficult," Rachel said. "I am genuinely remorseful." They entered a conference room where 5 people were already seated. Peter Davies was there, along with 2 executives from Human Resources, a woman from the legal department and Richard Chen himself. Rachel was surprised to see the CEO at her hearing. That was unusual. "Ms. Morrison, please have a seat," Richard said, gesturing to an empty chair. Rachel sat down, her hands shaking. Patricia sat beside her. Richard opened a folder on the table. "We're here to discuss the incident that occurred on Flight 2847 from New York to London 5 days ago. Ms. Morrison, you are accused of discriminatory behavior toward a first-class passenger. 3 separate passengers filed formal complaints. We have video evidence recorded by one of the passengers, and we have statements from other crew members who witnessed the incident." He looked directly at Rachel. "Before we review the evidence, I want to hear from you. What happened from your perspective?" Rachel took a deep breath. She had prepared a statement, but now the words felt inadequate. Still, she had to try. "I saw a black man in casual clothes approaching first class," Rachel began, her voice trembling. "I made an immediate assumption that he did not belong there. I did not check his boarding pass properly. I questioned his right to be in that section. I called for help as if there was a problem, when the only problem was my own prejudice. And 5th, Kwame said, clicking to his final slide, we need to measure everything. You can't improve what you don't measure. We should track diversity metrics, complaint rates, customer satisfaction broken down by demographic groups, everything. And this data should be reviewed quarterly by the board." Richard leaned back in his chair. "This is ambitious." "It needs to be," Kwame said. "Small changes produce small results. If you want to be an industry leader, you need to lead." "What about cost?" the CFO asked. "This sounds expensive," Kwame smiled. "I'm glad you asked. My foundation is prepared to fund the entire program for the first 2 years. After that, once you've seen the results, you can decide if it's worth continuing with your own budget." The room fell silent. Everyone stared at Kwame in shock. "How much are we talking about?" the CFO asked carefully. $20 million, Kwame said simply. $10 million per year for 2 years. That will cover training development, consultant fees, technology platforms for tracking and reporting, and additional staff dedicated to diversity and inclusion initiatives. Richard's eyes widened. "Mr. Osei, that's incredibly generous. But why would you invest so much in our company?" "Because this isn't just about your company," Kwame explained. "If we can make this work at Transatlantic, other airlines will follow. This industry has been resistant to change for too long. Someone needs to show that it's possible. Someone needs to prove that treating all customers with dignity and respect isn't just morally right, it's also good business." The head of Human Resources spoke up. "Mr. Osei, you mentioned that the flight attendant who discriminated against you would be part of developing the training program. Are you comfortable with that?" "I am," Kwame said. "In fact, I'd like to meet with her." The executives exchanged glances. "This was unexpected. You want to meet with her?" Richard asked carefully. "May I ask why?" Kwame thought about how to explain. "Because I need to understand what happened. Not just from my perspective, but from hers. What was she thinking? What assumptions was she making? Where did those assumptions come from? If we're going to change people's behavior, we need to understand their thought processes." "I can arrange that," Richard said, "but only if you're sure. You don't owe her anything." "I know," Kwame said, "but I owe it to myself to try to understand. And maybe she has insights that will help us build a better training program." The meeting continued for another 2 hours. They discussed timelines, implementation strategies, and potential challenges. Kwame was impressed by the executives' engagement. They asked smart questions and seemed genuinely committed to change. As the meeting concluded, Richard walked Kwame to the elevator. "I want to thank you again," Richard said. "You could have sued us. You could have gone to the media and destroyed our reputation. Instead, you're helping us become better. I don't want revenge, Kwame said. I want change. There's a difference. 3 days later, Rachel sat in a small conference room at the airline headquarters. She had been called in for what was described as an important meeting. She had no idea what to expect. When the door opened and Kwame walked in, Rachel felt her stomach drop. She stood up quickly, nearly knocking over her chair. "Mr. Osei," she said, her voice shaking. "I didn't know. They didn't tell me." "It's okay," Kwame said gently. He gestured to the chairs. "Please sit down." There was a mediator present, a woman named Dr. Sarah Williams who specialized in restorative justice. She explained the purpose of the meeting. Mr. Osei requested this conversation as part of his work with the airline to develop better training programs. Dr. Williams said, "This is not a formal proceeding. Nothing said here will be used against you, Ms. Morrison. The goal is simply to understand and learn from what happened." Rachel nodded, still trembling. Kwame looked at her directly. His face was kind but serious. "Ms. Morrison, I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to understand. Can you tell me what you were thinking when you saw me boarding the plane?" Rachel took a deep breath. She had thought about this question constantly for the past 3 weeks. She had been working with a therapist to unpack her own biases, but saying it out loud to the person she had hurt was different. "I saw a black man in a hoodie and jeans," Rachel said quietly. "My first thought was that you didn't look like you belonged in first class. I thought you were lost or confused. I thought maybe you were trying to sneak into a better seat." "Why did you think that?" Kwame asked. "Because..." Rachel struggled to find the words. "Because I have this picture in my mind of what a first-class passenger looks like. And you didn't match that picture." "What does that picture look like?" Kwame asked gently. Rachel closed her eyes. "White, usually male. Middle-aged or older. Wearing a suit or at least business casual clothes. Carrying an expensive briefcase or laptop bag. So anyone who doesn't match that picture doesn't belong in first class?" Kwame asked. "No," Rachel said quickly. "I mean, logically, I know that's not true. I've served all kinds of passengers in first class. But in that moment when I saw you, my brain made an automatic assumption. And I acted on that assumption without thinking. Where do you think that assumption came from?" Kwame asked. Rachel had discussed this extensively with her therapist. "From society, I guess. From media. From my own upbringing. I grew up in a small town that was almost entirely white. I didn't really interact with black people until I started working for the airline. And even then, most of the black passengers I saw were in economy class. So my brain started associating race with economic status even though I consciously knew that was wrong." Kwame nodded. "Thank you for being honest. That couldn't have been easy to say." Tears started falling down Rachel's face. "Mr. Osei, I'm so sorry. I hate that I thought those things. I hate that I treated you that way. I've been doing a lot of work to understand my own prejudices, but I know that doesn't make up for what I did." "No, it doesn't," Kwame agreed. "But it's a start. Can I tell you how your actions made me feel?" Rachel nodded, bracing herself. "I felt humiliated," Kwame said simply. "I felt like no matter what I accomplish, no matter how successful I become, there will always be people who see my skin color first and everything else second. I felt angry that I had to prove I belonged in a seat I had paid for. And I felt sad because I realized my children will probably face the same treatment someday." Rachel sobbed openly now. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I have a son who's 16, Kwame continued. His name is Daniel. He's brilliant and kind and ambitious. In a few years, he'll be traveling on his own. And I'm terrified that someone will treat him the way you treated me, or worse. I promise you," Rachel said fiercely, "I will never treat anyone that way again, and I'll do everything I can to make sure other people don't either." Kwame looked at her carefully. "I believe you mean that. And that's why I want to work with you on this training program. Your perspective is valuable. You understand how these biases form because you experience them yourself. You can help other people recognize their own prejudices before they act on them." "I'll do anything you need," Rachel said. "I'll share my story. I'll talk to every employee in this company if that's what it takes." "It won't be easy," Kwame warned. "You'll have to be vulnerable. You'll have to admit things about yourself that are uncomfortable. People will judge you." "I deserve to be judged," Rachel said. "What I did was wrong." "Yes, it was," Kwame agreed. "But you're getting a chance that not many people get. A chance to turn a terrible mistake into something meaningful. Don't waste it." They talked for another hour with Dr. Williams guiding the conversation. Rachel explained her journey of self-discovery over the past 3 weeks. Kwame shared more about his experiences with discrimination. They discussed ideas for the training program and how to make it effective. When the meeting ended, Rachel stood up. She looked at Kwame with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for giving me this chance. I won't let you down." "Don't do it for me," Kwame said. "Do it for the next black passenger who boards a plane. Do it for all the people who have been judged unfairly. Do it because it's the right thing to do." As Kwame left the building, he felt exhausted but hopeful. This was just the beginning. There was so much work ahead. But for the first time since that terrible flight, he felt like something good might come from it. He pulled out his phone and called Abena. "How did it go?" she asked. "It was hard," Kwame admitted, "but necessary. I think we're going to make real progress." "I'm proud of you," Abena said. "Come home. The kids want to hear about your day." Kwame smiled. "I'm on my way." 6 months had passed since the incident on Flight 2847. The changes at Transatlantic Airlines had been swift and comprehensive. Every employee, from the CEO to the newest baggage handler, had completed the mandatory unconscious bias training. The program was thorough and uncomfortable, forcing people to confront their own prejudices. Rachel had become one of the most effective trainers in the program. She traveled to airline hubs across the country, sharing her story with groups of employees. It was never easy. Standing in front of her colleagues and admitting what she had done required courage every single time. At a training session in Chicago, Rachel stood before a room of 50 flight attendants. She took a deep breath and began the story she had told dozens of times now. After the event, Kwame prepared to leave. Richard walked him to the elevator. "I can't thank you enough for what you've done," Richard said. "You turned a terrible situation into something transformative." "We all did it together," Kwame said. "But the work isn't finished. You need to maintain this momentum. Don't let it become just another corporate program that fades away." "We won't," Richard promised. "This is who we are now." Kwame flew home to London that evening on a transatlantic flight. This time, when he boarded in casual clothes with his backpack, the flight attendant greeted him warmly. "Good evening, Mr. Osei," the young man said with a genuine smile. "Welcome aboard. Your seat is 1A. Can I help you with your bag?" "I've got it, thank you," Kwame said, returning the smile. As the flight attendant walked away, an older passenger nearby leaned over. "Are you that Kwame Osei?" she asked. "The one who started all the training programs?" "I am," Kwame confirmed. "I want to thank you," the woman said. "My grandson is black. His father is black and his mother, my daughter, is white. I worry about him when he travels alone. I worry about how people will treat him. What you've done gives me hope that maybe things will be different for his generation." Kwame felt emotion rising in his chest. "I hope so too," he said quietly. The flight was smooth and uneventful. The service was excellent. The flight attendants treated every passenger with respect and warmth. It was exactly what air travel should be. When Kwame arrived home, his family was waiting. Daniel had grown taller in the past year. Amma was practicing for her school play. Little Kofi wanted to show his father a drawing he had made. "How was your trip, Dad?" Daniel asked. "Good," Kwame said. "Really good." Later that night, after the children were in bed, Kwame sat with Abena in their living room. He told her about the company event and the passenger who had thanked him. "Do you think you've made a real difference?" Abena asked. Kwame thought about the question carefully. "I think we've made a start," he said. "One airline has changed its culture. Other companies are following their example. That's more than I hoped for a year ago." "But," Abena prompted, hearing the hesitation in his voice. "But there's still so much work to do," Kwame said. "This is just one company, one industry. The bigger problems of racism and discrimination in society won't be solved by training programs alone. We need systemic change at every level. You can't solve everything," Abena said gently. "But you did solve something. That matters," Kwame nodded. She was right. Perfection was impossible, but progress was achievable. And sometimes progress was enough. 3 months later, Rachel completed her first full training program for new hires. She stood in front of 20 young people who had just been hired by the airline. They were diverse in race, gender, and background. The group included several people of color who a generation ago might not have been hired at all. Welcome to Transatlantic Airlines, Rachel said. You've joined a company that takes inclusion seriously. You'll complete this training before you serve your first passenger, and you'll repeat it annually for as long as you work here. Some of you might wonder why we spend so much time on this. Let me tell you a story. She told them about the incident that had changed her life. She held nothing back. She described her assumptions, her actions, and her shame. She showed them the path from prejudice to awareness to action. I tell you this story not to make you uncomfortable, Rachel concluded. I tell you so you understand that good people can do bad things when they don't examine their biases. I thought I was a good person. I was wrong. Don't make my mistake. Do the hard work of understanding your own prejudices before they hurt someone else. One young woman raised her hand. She was black with natural hair styled in elegant locks. Ms. Morrison, thank you for sharing that story. It must be hard to tell it every time. It is, Rachel admitted. But it's the least I can do. If my story prevents even one person from experiencing what Mr. Osei experienced, then it's worth the discomfort. After the training session ended, the young woman approached Rachel. My name is Jasmine, she said. I'm going to be a flight attendant, and I want you to know that your story mattered to me. I've experienced what Mr. Osei experienced more times than I can count. Knowing that this company is trying to change that is why I chose to work here. Rachel felt tears in her eyes. Thank you for telling me that. It means more than you know. As Rachel packed up her materials, she thought about how much had changed in 15 months. She was not the same person who had boarded that plane from New York to London. She had been broken down and rebuilt. She had faced the ugliest parts of herself and survived. She was not proud of what she had done. She never would be. But she was proud of what she was doing now. Every training session, every uncomfortable conversation, every moment of honesty was a step toward the person she wanted to be. That evening, Kwam received an email from Richard Chen. The subject line read, 1-year results. Attached was a detailed report showing the impact of the Diversity and Inclusion Initiative. Complaints of discrimination were down by 72%. Employee diversity had increased at all levels, including leadership. Customer satisfaction scores had improved across all demographic groups. And the airline had been named one of the best companies for minority employees by several major publications. But the statistic that caught Kwame's attention was at the end of the report. Over the past year, 15 other airlines had reached out to Transatlantic to learn about their program. 3 had already begun implementing similar initiatives. Change was spreading. Kwame forwarded the email to his team at the foundation. They had funded this project as an experiment. Now it was becoming a movement. He picked up his phone and typed a message to Rachel. Saw the 1-year results. You should be proud of what we've accomplished. This is just the beginning. Rachel's response came a few minutes later. Thank you for giving me the chance to be part of the solution. I will spend the rest of my career making sure no one else experiences what you did. Kwame smiled and set down his phone. He walked to his children's rooms to say goodnight. He stopped at Daniel's door and watched his son doing homework at his desk. Dad? Daniel said, noticing him. Everything okay? Everything's good, Kwame said. I'm just happy to be home. Daniel smiled and returned to his work. Kwame stood there for another moment, thinking about the world his children would inherit. It would not be perfect. Prejudice and discrimination would not disappear overnight. But maybe, just maybe, it would be a little bit better than the world he had grown up in, and that was worth fighting for. After the event, Kwame prepared to leave. Richard walked him to the elevator. I can't thank you enough for what you've done, Richard said. You turned a terrible situation into something transformative. We all did it together, Kwame said. But the work isn't finished. You need to maintain this momentum. Don't let it become just another corporate program that fades away. We won't, Richard promised. This is who we are now. Kwame flew home to London that evening on a transatlantic flight. This time, when he boarded in casual clothes with his backpack, the flight attendant greeted him warmly. Good evening, Mr. Osei, the young man said with a genuine smile. Welcome aboard. Your seat is 1A. Can I help you with your bag? I've got it, thank you, Kwame said, returning the smile. As the flight attendant walked away, an older passenger nearby leaned over. Are you that Kwame Osei? She asked. The one who started all the training programs. I am, Kwame confirmed. I want to thank you. the woman said. My grandson is black. His father is black and his mother, my daughter, is white. I worry about him when he travels alone. I worry about how people will treat him. What you've done gives me hope that maybe things will be different for his generation. Kwame felt emotion rising in his chest. I hope so too, he said quietly. The flight was smooth and uneventful. The service was excellent. The flight attendants treated every passenger with respect and warmth. It was exactly what air travel should be. When Kwame arrived home, his family was waiting. Daniel had grown taller in the past year. Amma was practicing for her school play. Little Kofi wanted to show his father a drawing he had made. How was your trip, Dad? Daniel asked. Good, Kwame said. Really good. Later that night, after the children were in bed, Kwame sat with Abena in their living room. He told her about the company event and the passenger who had thanked him. Do you think you've made a real difference? Abena asked. Kwame thought about the question carefully. I think we've made a start, he said. One airline has changed its culture. Other companies are following their example. That's more than I hoped for a year ago. But, Abena prompted, hearing the hesitation in his voice. But there's still so much work to do, Kwame said. This is just one company, one industry. The bigger problems of racism and discrimination in society won't be solved by training programs alone. We need systemic change at every level. You can't solve everything, Abena said gently, but you did solve something. That matters, Kwame nodded. She was right. Perfection was impossible, but progress was achievable. And sometimes progress was enough. 3 months later, Rachel completed her first full training program for new hires. She stood in front of 20 young people who had just been hired by the airline. They were diverse in race, gender, and background. The group included several people of color who a generation ago might not have been hired at all. Welcome to Transatlantic Airlines, Rachel said. You've joined a company that takes inclusion seriously. You'll complete this training before you serve your first passenger, and you'll repeat it annually for as long as you work here. Some of you might wonder why we spend so much time on this. Let me tell you a story. She told them about the incident that had changed her life. She held nothing back. She described her assumptions, her actions, and her shame. She showed them the path from prejudice to awareness to action. I tell you this story not to make you uncomfortable, Rachel concluded. I tell you so you understand that good people can do bad things when they don't examine their biases. I thought I was a good person. I was wrong. Don't make my mistake. Do the hard work of understanding your own prejudices before they hurt someone else. One young woman raised her hand. She was black with natural hair styled in elegant locks. Ms. Morrison, thank you for sharing that story. It must be hard to tell it every time. It is, Rachel admitted. But it's the least I can do. If my story prevents even one person from experiencing what Mr. Osei experienced, then it's worth the discomfort. After the training session ended, the young woman approached Rachel. My name is Jasmine, she said. I'm going to be a flight attendant, and I want you to know that your story mattered to me. I've experienced what Mr. Osei experienced more times than I can count. Knowing that this company is trying to change that is why I chose to work here. Rachel felt tears in her eyes. Thank you for telling me that. It means more than you know. As Rachel packed up her materials, she thought about how much had changed in 15 months. She was not the same person who had boarded that plane from New York to London. She had been broken down and rebuilt. She had faced the ugliest parts of herself and survived. She was not proud of what she had done. She never would be. But she was proud of what she was doing now. Every training session, every uncomfortable conversation, every moment of honesty was a step toward the person she wanted to be. That evening, Kwame received an email from Richard Chen. The subject line read, 1-year results. Attached was a detailed report showing the impact of the Diversity and Inclusion Initiative. Complaints of discrimination were down by 72%. Employee diversity had increased at all levels, including leadership. Customer satisfaction scores had improved across all demographic groups. And the airline had been named one of the best companies for minority employees by several major publications. But the statistic that caught Kwame's attention was at the end of the report. Over the past year, 15 other airlines had reached out to Transatlantic to learn about their program. 3 had already begun implementing similar initiatives. Change was spreading. Kwame forwarded the email to his team at the foundation. They had funded this project as an experiment. Now it was becoming a movement. He picked up his phone and typed a message to Rachel. saw the 1-year results. You should be proud of what we've accomplished. This is just the beginning. Rachel's response came a few minutes later. Thank you for giving me the chance to be part of the solution. I will spend the rest of my career making sure no one else experiences what you did. Kwame smiled and set down his phone. He walked to his children's rooms to say goodnight. He stopped at Daniel's door and watched his son doing homework at his desk. Dad? Daniel said, noticing him. Everything okay? Everything's good, Kwame said. I'm just happy to be home. Daniel smiled and returned to his work. Kwame stood there for another moment, thinking about the world his children would inherit. It would not be perfect. Prejudice and discrimination would not disappear overnight. But maybe, just maybe, it would be a little bit better than the world he had grown up in, and that was worth fighting for.